Well, let's go now to Bradford in the UK. Marchella Ward is joining us now. She's a lecturer in classical studies at the Open University. Really good to have you with us, Marchella. Firstly, on the surface, this does appear to be quite a significant and perhaps controversial move. Some critics, like yourself, argue that it's essentially rewriting a history that has been set for many centuries. Tell us more about how you're reacting to the British Museum's decision.
Well, good morning, and thank you ever so much for having me. I think what's really important here is that Israel is attempting to rewrite history. And in Palestine itself, this takes the form of the destruction, colonization, and occupation of archaeological sites. Outside of Palestine, this takes the form of political pressure by expressly pro-Israel Zionist organizations against institutions like museums, but also universities, in an attempt to intimidate them to change the facts of history, to remove the term ancient Palestine, and therefore to erase the Palestinian people, the history of the Palestinian people. And this is important because this is, of course, an aspect of genocide. Genocide includes not just the attempt to erase the people in the present, but also the people in the past. So I think any erasure of the term ancient Palestine is an extremely poor decision on the part of any institution that agrees to be pressured into doing it. And I think it runs the risk of being very seriously complicit with the genocide of the Palestinian people.
Those at the British Museum would argue that this move is more about a scholarly precision, but of course critics like yourself argue that they're simply caving in to contemporary political pressure. Which is it in this case? I mean, you've touched on it earlier. And how often do these clashes occur?
Well, the question of removing the term ancient Palestine has nothing to do with historical accuracy. You know, I'm a scholar of the ancient world. I use the term ancient Palestine all the time in my work. In fact, I think it would be difficult to find an ancient historian who doesn't use the term ancient Palestine. That is simply the standard, accurate term to use to describe this region, you know, in this moment of antiquity. The term was used very, very early on. We find it, for instance, in the 5th century BCE in the work of a historian called Herodotus, a Greek historian. That's not even the first appearance of the term, but this is a term that has been around for a very long time. It is the standard term that is used. And part of the reason that it's important to use this term is because various other terms that are proposed to replace it, for instance, Judea, Samaria, or even ancient Israel, all of those terms that are proposed as a replacement are actually an attempt, a Zionist attempt on behalf of Israel to stake a claim to the ancient past. And this is the logic of ethno-nationalism. This is the idea that a state which is actually very modern, you know, in fact finds an ancient antiquity for itself. And that is an entirely political thing to do. That's an entirely political narrative. So if we erase the term ancient Palestine, we are certainly doing nothing to make those displays more accurate. In fact, we're making them less accurate, and we're capitulating to what is a political attempt, you know, on the part of Israel and pro-Israel organizations to erase the Palestinian people.
Experts like yourself are applying pressure on the British Museum to reverse its decision. How hopeful are you that they'll actually do this and respond to very fair points that people like yourself have made?
Well, I have to remain hopeful because I have to believe that historians do not wish to be complicit in the genocide of the Palestinians. You know, we are in a moment where we need historians to stop believing that history should be apolitical, to understand that how we tell the story of history has always been something political. It's always been about how the world is. So we need historians, museum curators, anyone else responsible for the public narrative of history to really understand the political narrative that they are being co-opted into by organizations like UK Lawyers for Israel. We need them to refuse the erasure of the Palestinians in the past and in the present. And I call on the British Museum to refuse this attempt to co-opt them into complicity with genocide.
Okay, Marchella Ward, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much again for joining us on the program.
Thank you.